Good morning. I'm Dan Lutz. I'm the Wayne County Prosecuting Attorney, and we're here because there's two very important issues on the ballot. One is a statewide issue. That's called Issue 1 that we want to talk about because all of us here are in opposition to it. And the other is the issue to fund the Justice Center, in particular a new jail, because we do not have enough jail space for our judges to do the job they need to do. So first, I'm going to speak to Issue 1. This is the statewide issue. It's a constitutional amendment. I want people to understand that. This is not a statute, meaning it's going into the Constitution if it passes. And if it passes, it's very difficult to change. It would take another ballot initiative to change it and to stop the havoc it will wreak, in my opinion. So this kind of thing should not be in our Constitution, and that's what this is, and the people need to understand that. But the two main points I want to address with Issue 1, and I'll let others speak to some of the other issues. Possession of any amount of any drug will be a misdemeanor, and not only just a misdemeanor. And for those of you who don't know, felonies are considered our serious criminal offenses, and misdemeanors are less serious criminal offenses. Felonies you can go to prison for, misdemeanors you go to the local jail for. So not only will all possession cases, meaning possession of any drug, fentanyl, carfentanil, heroin, methamphetamine, LSD, date rape drugs, will be misdemeanors. They will be misdemeanors that you cannot be jailed for them until a third conviction in 2 years. That's what State Issue 1 does. In my opinion, and I think everybody up here, that sends the wrong message to our children. Okay, if you can't even go to jail until a third conviction in 2 years for possessing these deadly substances, what is that telling our children in regard to, are they really that deadly? Just keep this in mind. A 20-year-old college kid with a beer will face more potential consequences than someone caught with enough fentanyl, even from the proponent's best reading of the amendment, that could kill up to 10,000 people. So enough fentanyl to kill up to 10,000 people would get less of a consequence, if any, than a college kid, a 20-year-old college kid with a beer. And that's just wrong. Ohio will effectively have the most lenient drug laws in the state if Issue 1 passes. And I don't think we want that. That would create a haven for drug traffickers and drug users alike, and will cause a whole host of other unintended consequences should Issue 1 pass. And I want people to know that Issue 1 is just not about rehabilitating those addicted to drugs. That's what the proponents are trying to say, and to only keep violent offenders in prison. Well, in fact, Issue 1 will release many violent offenders from prison because it also calls for up to a 25% plus sentence reduction for felons who are already in prison. So in other words, it's retroactive, and it goes into the future. It allows the Department of Rehabilitation and Correction to reduce the sentences of prisoners who are convicted of such crimes as voluntary manslaughter, involuntary manslaughter, felonious assault, aggravated assault, permitting child abuse, kidnapping, abduction, extortion, trafficking in persons, which is human trafficking, gross sexual imposition, aggravated arson, aggravated robbery, aggravated burglary, felony domestic violence, endangering children, illegal manufacture of drugs, and funding drug trafficking. So when they say they're just trying to keep only the most violent offenders in prison, that's not true, because these are violent convicts that will be able to get up to a 25% plus 30-day sentence reduction, up to 25% for simply participating in some sort of prison program for work, rehabilitation, or treatment, not completing, but just participating. If they complete it, they get an additional 30 days off. So I just want those two main points that I'm going to talk about. That is that this is possession of any amount of any drug will be a misdemeanor that's non-jailable until a third conviction in 2 years. And secondly, it's going to allow a whole bunch, even by the proponents' estimates, it will release 10,000 people out of our prison system onto our streets early. So with that said, I want to introduce Judge Timothy Van Sickle, who's going to speak to a couple other aspects of this very problematic issue, and also to the issue regarding our jail and the overcrowding of our jail. Thank you.
Thank you. Issue 1 is a terrible approach to treating drug addicts and treating the problem of addiction. And that is because it removes from the court system the ability to effectively administer drug courts. Drug courts have been proven time and time again to be one of the most effective ways of dealing with people who are facing addiction. Let's face it, if people could simply walk away from addiction, it wouldn't be the problem that it is today. People need the enhanced accountability, the fact that there is a sanction, for an appropriate sanction, for not following the rules. They need to know that there are resources available, and they need to know that they will be held accountable for making the choices that lead them back into addiction and into relapse. Issue 1 effectively takes that option off the table for judges. There are very few remedies that Issue 1 will allow, if any, that will be effective in deterring people who are facing addiction, and the court will be hamstrung with what it can do. And as I've said before, if Issue 1 passes, people will die. That is not even open for debate. That is going to happen because it takes away one of the most effective ways of treating addicts through drug courts. One of the arguments that the proponents try to sell this with is that it's going to result in all kinds of money for treatment. The Office of Budget and Management has recently released a study that indicates that this Issue 1 could cost the state of Ohio tens of millions of dollars. And that means that the money for treatment will probably not be there. So it's a double whammy in the sense that we're going to take away an effective option of treating people that are facing addiction. We're going to lessen the penalties, and we're going to end up with less money to actually end up treating the people that need it the most. Like I said, Issue 1 is a terrible approach for treating addiction, and you need to know that. And with that, I'll turn it over to Commissioner Sue Smale to talk about the jail. Thank you.
Thank you. We are facing a critical stage here at our Wayne County Justice Center. The jail is overcrowded. Its facilities, its systems are failing, the HVAC, we have plumbing issues, but overcrowding is the biggest thing. We are now housing in between 20 and 40 inmates a day out of county. We have already advanced $125,000 to the Sheriff's Department this year, and if the current situation keeps up, we're looking at perhaps $300,000 by year's end. The jail is more than just a jail. It is sometimes the first stop for a mental health facility. Over 80% of the inmates here do receive some sort of treatment. We currently have over 1,600 individuals in Wayne County in some sort of alternative program. So that will not go away. Some of the people have said we need to spend more money on mental health and not so much on a jail. But we do have many mental health programs available to people if they would just take advantage. The jail is one more tool that the judges have in their toolbox. When people repeatedly violate probation, violate house arrest, the judges have to have some sort of a hammer to hold over them so that they do comply. We have been told by one mother, "Thank you for putting my son in jail, otherwise he would be dead," because they are repeat addicts, and it's an illness. You know, we look at it and say, why can't they just stop? They can't stop. The other thing is we are asking for a 0.3% sales tax increase that will be on the November ballot. That represents 30 cents, 3 cents on $10. So if you make a $10 purchase in Wayne County right now, you pay $10.65. And if the sales tax levy passes, it would be $10.68. Currently, of our 6.5% sales tax that we collect in Wayne County, only 0.75% stays here in the county. The other 5.75% goes back to the state. So with the addition of the 0.3%, we would then have 1.05% here in Wayne County, and that's what we operate our budget on. This is, like I said, a critical issue. We hope that you get out and support this issue on the ballot, and it would just help us to build this new facility. We're planning on building in the parking lot behind this facility, the current Justice Center facility. We're planning on 240 beds, but that has not even gotten to the design stage yet. Our Sheriff's Department is, they're boxed in. They can't properly classify the inmates that are here. We have some misdemeanants in with maximum security people, and that's just not a good situation. This jail was built for 6 female inmates. We now at any one time have between 20 and 30 females. So that just creates all sorts of problems. You can't get them properly separated, and like I said, classification is a real issue. So this is a very critical thing here in Wayne County that we're facing. When the judges can't sentence people to jail, they're out on the street, and then they become repeat offenders in the time that they're waiting for their sentencing or their hearing. So we would really appreciate your support of this sales tax levy that's on the ballot on November 6th. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Jason Waddell. I'm the director of the Medway Drug Enforcement Agency. I'm not going to sit up here and repeat everything that you've just heard. I just want to talk from the enforcement standpoint of this issue. I got into law enforcement almost 20 years ago and quickly found that 90% of what I was doing was somehow related to drug use or drug abuse. So my goal at that point was to try to get to the source of that problem, working myself up from one of the smallest villages in this county to the director of Medway Drug Enforcement Agency. Everything that we deal with on the road, out on the road, rapes, robberies, burglaries, thefts, assaults, it's all in one way or another we can trace it back to drugs. By passing this bill, it's going to let these same offenders who are in prison for these offenses, it's going to let them out. The true victims of this bill are going to be the citizens of Ohio. The users of the drugs that we're talking about today, they're victims of the dealer, and we're going to let the dealers out of jail essentially if this passes. We can't do this. We have to be responsible. We have to read this bill for what it is, be informed voters, and vote no on this issue. Ohioans have a responsibility to do the right thing here, and now's their time. So.
Thank
you. As a pastor, I'm here today on behalf of these pastors, and as a member of the Wayne County Opiate Task Force, also as a collaborator on the state level, working with the Attorney General for the last 4 years on the opiate crisis, I'm here today, and we're here today to oppose Issue 1. We are protectors and defenders of life. This amendment would unleash death into our communities. As it's already been said, a man walking down the street with a beer can would have more consequences than a man with 1,000 pounds of heroin. On the day that this passes and is implemented, 10,000 prisoners or 10,000 convicts that have already been sentenced will be released into our communities, and no community would be able to financially take that kind and endure that kind of financial devastation. But the most devastating effect that it would have is it would remove one of our greatest tools that we have had in our community, and that is it would remove our drug courts. I can't tell you as a pastor how many times I have sat and talked to a parent who has said, thank God for the judges and the drug courts. That is our greatest tool. This amendment has been promoted as a money-saving prison reform, and that's what makes it confusing and deceiving. It is really not a law at all. People are saying it's a law. It is an amendment that will change the Constitution and make it impossible to change without a legislational process. So as pastors, we're here today to urge this community on November the 6th, go out and vote no on Issue 1. I want to introduce Pastor
I'm Minister Bob Rand. I'm from Columbus, Ohio, and I represent the community in which these people will go into. These are drug addicts. They need help. There is nothing in this bill that mandates, that guarantees that they will get help. They will be released upon our community. We know that in every community in the state of Ohio. There are homeless people who need help. Truly, this is a bad way to solve a problem that was created years ago. This is not how you solve the problem. You do not release drug addicts, people who are not, look, I spent 25 years as a crack addict. Yes, I'm one of those people. Thank to God, my life changed. The only thing a drug addict wants is his next high. The question is, what will he do to get that high? When you release these people into our community, they are unemployable, they have little or no skills. Where will you release them? More than likely in my community. Already high crime areas. I am against this issue, not because I don't want to help people who need help, but because this is not the way to help. You need to vote no on issue 1. As I said earlier, releasing people with no financial means to take care of themselves, and you offering nothing in this bill that will mandate money for their care, is a bad, bad decision. It's already a bad decision. You don't follow up with another bad decision to create an even greater problem. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Barbara Clark, and I am the president of the Black Women's Voters League. It is so important that we register to vote and go vote. It's also important that we read that bill. We look at the language that says up to. They're saying up to 25%. So you can get 2%. So make sure you read the bill. I'm also a recovering addict. There's no way I'm going to minimize the drugs that I use. No way that I'm going to minimize the looks on my children's face when I would come home after 2 or 3 days. I'm not minimizing that. You will not minimize the power of heroin and fentanyl in our community. It is deadly. It is deadly. I can see, just picture it, someone running from the law with fentanyl and throw it into a cart, a carriage with a baby in it because they think they're hiding it. Our babies have no choice in the matter. They don't have an answer in the matter. We have to protect our children, protect our families. It's no. There's no mandated treatment in that bill either. So you're not trying to fix addicts. It's something else behind it. So I ask everyone and encourage everyone to read the bill. And when you get done reading, I guarantee it's a no on issue 1.
Okay, just to wrap up, I want to make very clear here, we have 2 issues on the ballot in November here in Wayne County. Issue 1's a statewide issue, and again, it's a proposed constitutional amendment. It will put the terms of issue 1 into the Constitution, cannot be changed legislatively, has to be changed by another ballot initiative. Very difficult to change if we get it wrong. Issue 1's written very poorly. People argue about what it really says. For that reason alone, why do we want to put that language into our Ohio Constitution? If for all these other reasons stated, if it's so poorly written, why are we putting that into our state constitution? So vote no on issue 1. Vote yes on the funding issue, the sales tax increase for our Justice Center and our jail, because for the same reasons we need that here locally. We need a yes on that for the same reasons we want to vote no on issue 1 from a statewide perspective. At this point, I'll take some questions from anyone if they have it. I've studied issue 1 extensively. This whole notebook here is my notebook on issue 1. So I'll say one more thing before I take questions. It says something when all our major papers around the state have come out saying vote no on issue 1. That says something, okay? So we know it's a bad issue. You're going to see all these slick TV commercials because there's millions of dollars coming from out of our state trying to get this issue passed. Just remember that. These are millions of dollars from outside the state trying to get this issue passed in Ohio, and we don't want that. So with that, are there any questions? Jack?
So if issue 1 does pass and it becomes a constitutional amendment, what would you imagine the either immediate or long-term impacts would be right here in Wayne County?
Well, I like what Judge Van Sickle said. He said people are going to die. They're dying now, but we're going to have an increase of overdose deaths just because drugs are going to be so much more prevalent. The cost-benefit analysis for someone who deals in this poison, someone who traffics it, someone who possesses it, is going to be a no-brainer to them. There's going to be no risk, and their benefit in terms of profiting from selling this poison, these deadly substances, is going to be great. So we're going to see a huge increase in the opiate crisis and other drug problems, methamphetamine, heroin, LSD, all those drugs that we're dealing with, primarily right now, the opiates and methamphetamine, are just going to surge. Any other questions? Jack?
Just one more.
Yep. You're the reporter, so you get to ask it.
So you bring up, several people brought up, the kind of the murky language on issue 1. Is there some version of a bill or an amendment like that that you would support if it had tighter language, if it was more focused, if it mandated treatment? What would you envision as a good solution?
Yeah, there was a bipartisan proposal coming out of Columbus with the Franklin County prosecutor Ron O'Brien and the Columbus City prosecutor that I think is a much better idea. First of all, if we're going to do something like this, why are we doing it in our Constitution, right? Why not do it as a statutory method? Now, proponents of State Issue 1 will say because the legislature has done nothing to resolve this problem. That is absolutely not true. I could run down and bore everyone with a long list of what our General Assembly has done to address the drug crisis in Ohio and has spent up to $1 billion doing so. So that is not true, what proponents will say. Secondly, you'll hear proponents say that, well, if someone's caught with this much drugs that you're saying, they'll just be charged with trafficking. Well, I can tell you, as a prosecutor, we don't have possession with intent to distribute as a crime in Ohio. Okay, so if issue 1 passes, I'm going to be hammering on the doors of our legislators to get that passed because we have to prove certain things. We can't just prove from someone possessing amount of a drug that they intended to traffic it. We don't have that crime here in Ohio. Our trafficking laws don't read that way. So that's another red herring that the proponents are throwing out there saying, well, the opponents are just trying to scare people because they could just be charged with trafficking. I can tell you as a prosecutor that is not true. And all the prosecutors around the state will tell you that's not true, as well as the judges. So I'm having a difficult time actually here in Wayne County finding someone who will step up in support of issue 1. I'd love to debate them. To me, that's the easy one, tee it up. But we have a difficult time doing it, and I've been speaking in several venues against issue 1. So again, statewide, Ohioans do not want issue 1. We'll have the most lenient drug laws in the nation, in my opinion, if it passes. And then locally here in Wayne County, we need a new jail facility. We need to fix what we've got here so the judges have the ability to help people who are truly trapped in addiction by not only having the carrot, but also having the stick, the potential for being incarcerated, so it motivates them to get into treatment. Let me just tell you one thing that I think is a harbinger of what may come if issue 1 passes. A couple years ago, a year and a half ago, the Good Samaritan law passed, right? Good Samaritan law gives immunity to anybody possessing F5, felony 5 level drugs, if they simply contact a treatment facility. So if someone's caught with a 5th degree felony level of drugs, they simply need to contact a treatment facility, and if they show law enforcement that in our office, they're immune from prosecution. So law enforcement officers, when they catch someone who's overdosed or in possession of an F5 level of a drug, will give them a pamphlet explain to them all their rights under the Good Samaritan law. How many people do you think have taken advantage of that here in Wayne County? How many people? We wait 30 days. We wait for someone to come in and bring in the proof, and then we will present it to a grand jury and indict them if we don't have it. How many people after indictment have said, hey, wait a minute, I contacted a treatment facility? 0. Heard someone from Ashland at our last opiates task force say they've had 1 instance where somebody has taken advantage of the Good Samaritan law. So my point is, without the stick, people are not going to be motivated to get into treatment and complete treatment and hopefully save their lives.
Dan, can I chime in on that
Sure.
for a second?
Yep.
From the faith standpoint, from a pastor standpoint, along those lines, that has been one of the greatest tools that we can use as pastors when we are comforting our parishioners when they have loved ones that are going to court and going before the judge with their loved ones, encouraging them to talk to the courts, talk to the attorneys, and request for a drug court, because we know that that is a tool that they can use, not just to, and we use it as a leverage over top of them, but it is hope for those parents and those spouses that want to really get help for their loved ones, because they know that they have exhausted all of their efforts to help them, and that this is one tool that they can use. And countless times I have them come back and say, thank you. Thank you for that encouragement, because that was the number one thing that I held on to, that I was able to know that the courts were going to help me get them into treatment. And I can't tell you how many testimonies I have from those people that have come back from those treatment facilities and that are now on the road to recovery because of that great tool. And if this passes, we are going to see that go away. And like we said, the confusion and all the deception around this is that it's been promoted as a money-saving prison reform. But the problem is, yes, nobody is disputing that we want to lower our prison population and we want to lower our finances in the state. Nobody wants to send Johnny, who has never had a prison record and has gotten caught up with addictions because of a sports injury. We don't want to send him to prison. And we do need to have a discussion about that and come up with a way to prevent that. But this is not the tool to do it. So that's why we encourage them to vote no.
I just want to have one more thing I wanted to talk about. In the bill, it says you have to be caught 3 times within 24 months. As I stated before, I'm a recovering addict. I was out there 20 years. It took me 18 years to get caught twice. And I know I'm not the smartest addict out there. So people know the ways of not getting caught. So that's garbage. 3 times in 24 months. It took me 18 years to get caught twice. I just want you to remember that when you go to the polls. Thank you.
From the court's perspective, something else I want to share with you that was brought to my attention, or that I remembered, is just down the hall here in the jail, we've had addicts who have reached the end of their jail sentence, and they're standing at the counter crying and sobbing, pleading to be kept in jail. They want to stay in jail because they know exactly what's going to happen when they get released. They know that as soon as they're turned out, they're going back to the same environment, the same people, the same problems, and they're going to have the same result. They don't want to be an addict any more than we want them to stop. They want to do everything they can, but if they're not in jail sometimes, they know they're not going to have the opportunity to stay clean even long enough to give them a fighting chance at staying clean and sober. You got to understand, there's a whole other perspective on that. Thank you.
Sure, come on in. Yep.
When you go to vote, I want to put a picture in your brain. I want you to think about the dependent families. They're called codependents. The children whose fathers are spending money on drugs, whose mothers are not at home, who are left basically oftentimes homeless. I want you to think about them and how they're suffering. So when you vote yes, you bring pain to their lives. I also want you to understand something else. Let us make this very clear. There's an old saying, where there's a demand, there will be a supplier. I guarantee you that if you let this bill pass, drug dealers out of other countries will immediately focus on Ohio as a major distributing area. Hear me clearly. I work in the community. I'm telling you what goes on in the community. I'm not a police officer. I am telling you what I have to deal with every day. Families who are calling me to help them, to help their mothers, their children, their brothers, their sisters. A drug addict is not functioning in a normal mental state. Keep that in mind when you make this vote.
One last myth I just want to address is that the proponents will say this is going to stop the addiction to prison pipeline or the probation to prison pipeline. The last Department of Rehabilitation and Correction census of Ohio prisons has less than 2,700 people in prison for F4 and F5, or excuse me, for all drug possession offenses, first, second, third degree, fourth degree, and fifth degree possession offenses. So I can tell you that the courts are not sending addicts to prison. The only time they send them to prison is maybe after their 7th or 8th chance. Our courts in Ohio are working and doing the best they can through the courts, through the drug courts, the specialty courts that were talked about, to get people help, to get them treatment. It's only when the person just thumbs their nose at the court for that last time, after probably several times, that the judge will have no recourse but to say, okay, we got to use the stick. We got to send you to prison. So that's a myth. Out of the 50,000 inmates in the state of Ohio prison system, there's less than 2,700 for any drug possession case. That's first degree through fifth degree felonies. So just keep that in mind. So that's why all these other felons that I mentioned earlier, who are violent felons, need to be released from prison to get what they think, the proponents think, any kind of cost savings. That's why they have to let out those 10,000 folks who have been convicted of those violent offenses other than what they claim murder, rape, and child molestation. Well, we don't even have child molestation as an offense in Ohio. We have several sex offenses where there can be a child victim. So again, this issue is very poorly written. We don't want it in our Ohio Constitution. Any other questions before we conclude? When you want to come up and talk, sir?
We passed marijuana. It shouldn't have been. Anytime you put something in that's bad, it's nothing going to come good of it. That should be out. Issue 1 shouldn't pass. I'll say that. But I'm going to say our churches are the welfare of your peoples in this world. Until all of us get back to the church and get back to the pastors of the church, and the church pastors do their job, ain't gonna work.
Yep.
The Lord said it's not gonna work. The only good that's gonna work is through them that love the Lord. And all that's gonna ever last is gonna be God. We're gonna pass away, but the word is never gonna pass away. So you're gonna have to stick to your church.
Right. And that's why I'm heartened by the fact that we have many members here standing behind me, men such as yourself who are from the faith community.
Another thing is, why would whoever put that in want something like that for this country when, if they wanted anything, they should have been to improve it, not to try to make it worse.
Right.
I can't understand that.
Again, and this is based on a proposition coming out of California. So they're trying to push what they think, and it hasn't really worked well in California. It hasn't come near the savings they thought it would result in. But why they're trying to push it on Ohio is a good question for everybody to ask. Why is George Soros and Mark Zuckerberg wanting this issue to pass in Ohio? Everybody needs to ask that question. It's an out-of-state issue. They'll say it's a citizen initiative. Well, $4 million were spent to cause people to go around and, in my opinion, deceive people about what the issue is really about. Because the language in the proposition that they were handing around and talking about is different from the actual amendment language. And that's why I say it's going to apply to any drug, any amount, because they misworded it in the actual amendment language. And legal minds are going to argue about that, but if that's true, again, why are we putting this garbage in our Ohio Constitution? Thank you. Any other questions? All right. Well, thanks everybody for being here. Thank you for your support. And again, if anybody has any questions about issue 1 that they didn't think to ask, call me. I'll return your phone call. I'll answer it because this is something I'm very passionate about. Because as Chief Justice Maureen O'Connor said, if issue 1 passes, this is going to be catastrophic to the state of Ohio. All right, thank you.